I'm pleased to introduce to you Mr. David Batstone. He is co-founder and president of the global anti-slavery organization called Not for Sale, and co-founder and managing partner of Just Business, which is an international investment group that incubates social enterprises. He's currently a business professor at the University of San Francisco. David has authored 5 books. He's the recipient of 2 National Journalist Awards and was named National Endowment for the Humanities Chair at the University of San Francisco for his work in technology and ethics. He's here to speak to us about the business of social change. Please welcome Mr. David Batstone.
It's so terrific to be back in Chicago. I was born here. I was born in Oak Park. West Sub Hospital, me and Ernest Hemingway. He never learned to write in complete sentences, which I decided to be a PhD and actually pursue that. So I want to tell you how Chicago I am. I was, growing up, a huge Little League baseball player. George Will and I were in the same Little League. And I decided that, Ernie Banks had a column in the Chicago Tribune at that stage. I don't know if Ernie Banks actually paid much attention to it. Someone did it for him, but it was his column in the Tribune. And I was 12, and I decided to write in and ask him about some world-changing event, I'm sure. And he wrote back, chose my letter in the Chicago Tribune. So, I mean, we're talking deep Chicago roots here. Illinois lost me at 18. I went to California, and, I felt someone needed to take advantage of the beach and mountains of California. I took the task, but I've been there since, so about 4 or 5 years now. So I've stayed with California, and part of the I don't want to bore you with my career, but there was a point about 10 years ago where I felt pretty settled and pretty happy having 2 parallel disciplines. One was as a professor at the University of San Francisco, and the other was part of a private equity firm, an investment bank, a niche investment bank in the technology industry. So I wasn't looking for a new gig. I wasn't looking for another activity to enhance my life. But I discovered that the local restaurant in the Bay Area in San Francisco that I would go to on a regular basis, I discovered it was a center of a human trafficking ring that had brought over 500 teenagers, ages 12 to 19, into the United States from Bangalore, India, for the purpose of forced labor. Human trafficking, modern slavery, in my own backyard in the 21st century. I couldn't believe it. They would bring them first into the restaurant, force them to wash dishes, wait on tables, then take them out to fruit and vegetable fields, construction crews, and brothels in Northern California. Their families were threatened with violence back at home if they complained, as were the young kids. They were not paid any meaningful wages just to keep themselves alive, and they were for years kept as slaves. I couldn't believe it. So my mother and I had this debate, whether I was born with a blessing or a curse. It's called curiosity. It led me to be an investigative reporter at one point in my life. Used to write for the New York Times and Wired and Chicago Tribune. And so I already had that kind of facility or skill set. So I want to find out, is this a one-off eccentric event from San Francisco? We have a few eccentricities in San Francisco. Or is this something that was something more a pattern or prolific or something that was happening in other parts of the world? So I called friends here in Chicago, and I learned that there were young girls from Eastern Europe who were being brought here for the commercial sex industry. I had friends in LA that said that there were young Thai women, over 115, who were brought to Los Angeles, forced to sew clothes every day, locked in the factory, and the next day they were put back in front of the sewing machines. I learned from friends in the East Coast, Virginia, Maryland. Wealthy American families had house slaves, domestic servants that they forced to work in their home and locked in their homes. I couldn't believe it. So I decided to take a year leave of absence from my investment firm and my university, and I went around the world. And I decided that I was going to follow the money. I went from San Francisco to Bangalore. I went from Los Angeles to Thailand. I went from Maryland to Cameroon. I went all over the globe, and my real passion, my interest was I want to expose this. I wasn't going to be a Liam Neeson, in Taken, where I was going to run in. I mean, in my fantasy I did, but my weapon was going to be my pen. All right, so I was going to write a book, and I was going to make it visible. And after that year, I would return to my life as an investor and a professor. And sometimes things don't always happen as you expect them. So I warn you, don't take one step, because then your next foot is ready to move forward on the next step. And tonight is about that journey. I learned on my year-long investigation that human trafficking is a $32 billion industry every year. That's bigger than Starbucks, Nike, and Google combined each year. So it's formidable. People make money off of other people's exploitation. Like the drug trade, it's illicit, but with drugs, you sell it once and you lose your product. With human trafficking, those individuals can make money for you every day. Human trafficking now is the second largest illicit trade in the world after drugs. Guns is now third. 30 million people are engaged in human trafficking. Now, one of the unexpected parts of my journey was going to Thailand from Los Angeles to track these young women who are sewing victims, people forced to sew every day. And when I got to Thailand, I was told I should meet this woman in the north of Thailand. Her name is Quinlan. She lives today in the very, very north, but at that stage she lived in Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai, some of you might have been there, is a city that's surrounded by aqueducts or like a river that circles the city. And Quinlan, in a certain respect, stumbled into human trafficking, or it found her like it found me. She wasn't looking for it. She was a painter, and every day she'd walk to her studio. And on the way to her studio, she'd see these little kids, 11, 12 years old, sometimes 10, who were sleeping by the aqueducts. So, being curious in her own way, one day she decided to take empty canvases, brushes, and tins of paint down to the waterfront and ask the kids to paint their stories. And as they start to paint their stories, these nightmares appear on canvas. And they're not puppy dogs or rainbows. She said, where do you get these stories? You're only 10 or 11, 12 years old maybe. And they said, we're not from Thailand. We're from Laos, we're from Burma, Myanmar, we're from far away as China. We were brought here, and we were forced to work in these karaoke bars, where men would come from all over the world to do things to us that they'd be arrested for doing in their home country. Commercial sex rings for children. She says, we're the lucky ones. It's the lucky ones. I said, yeah, you know what? We've escaped. That's why we're living down here. But our friends, they're still in there every night. Well, Quinlan had this righteous rage, and she needed to do something about it. She was incensed. So I understand that. That night, she went to the first karaoke bar she could find. She ran up to the bar where there's two little girls and a boy talking to adult clients. She grabbed them and ran out. It's not the most sophisticated intervention strategy. The next night, she goes into another karaoke bar, sees two little girls, runs in, grabs them, and runs out. Now, when I meet Quinlan, she has 27 kids and no plan. Now, probably you had kids and you didn't have a plan either. But she's got 27 kids and no plan, and they're living in the very north of Thailand. And they have these thatch roofs, and they're all dirt floors. This was the property when I met it back in the year 2002, 2003. And, I was just so inspired by her passion and what she wanted to do and these young kids. So I said to her, okay, listen, I'm going to write a book, and I've got a big family, and I always force them to buy lots of books. And so with the proceeds of that book, I'll build you a house for your 27 kids. That was my complete plan. Right? That was step 2. There's an old Ghanaian from Ghana proverb that you don't mind stumbling because it makes you move forward more quickly. because 2, 3, 4, 5 started happening quite rapidly after that. So I said, okay, I'll build you one home, all right? And then I get back to San Francisco, and I'm writing my book. I'm in chapter 2. I'm not very good at marketing. Maybe you could help me with that. The book's called Not for Sale. I'm thinking about writing a sequel, Steal This Book, but Abby Hoffman got that years ago. Okay, so I'm writing the book. I'm in chapter 2, and I get this phone call from Quinlan that the facilities that they did have burnt down, and she now has 53 kids. I'm thinking, this better be one damn good book, because I now have to build 2 homes. All right, I'll build 2 homes for you. All right? So I'm now writing with new determination. This is how I type when I need to really produce, right? I'm writing with new determination, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to write this bestseller now because I'm going to build 2 homes in the north of Thailand. And I get a call from Quinlan. I'm in chapter 6. There's now 88 kids. I'm like slowed down on the rescues already. So it's at this stage I say, I better create an organization. And it's called Not for Sale. And so the purpose of our organization was to build a village. And you go to the north of Thailand today, and you're going to see this village of over 150 kids at any one time. And what's really, really inspiring to me is that a lot of those little 11 and 12-year-olds I met way back then, the first 3 just graduated from university. Pretty cool. Thank you. There's 45 more who are going to the top boarding schools in the country to prepare themselves for our future. And the younger kids are getting a security. And it's just, you know, in a sense, I do say on one level, okay, done, that's enough. I feel like my life that's a good investment of my time. But there's another level where I almost felt like I was at the end of a river. I'm pulling bodies out, and they're flailing, and they're drowning. And I could do that for the rest of my life. But it wouldn't solve the problem. There's another stream of kids who are coming down the river. So to show compassion, to show mercy, that's a part of our DNA. And you always wonder when someone can't do that, there must be something wrong with them. Just to be able to show compassion to someone who's in need. But it's not enough. At some point, you have to walk upstream. You need to walk up the river and find out, why are so many kids and women in the world today falling into this kind of exploitation? 30 million people. And how do we intervene and prevent that from happening? How do we create systems of more justice, systems of more opportunity, systems of a future, rather than healing the wounds of the past? Now, I got to admit, too, being a business professor, being someone who is involved in investment, I kind of felt like, well, wait a second. Why is it, when I started to approach this problem, why is it that I looked at slavery as a charity? Right? I turned my head off and I turned my heart on. Right? Which is a great thing. That's what your heart does. Boy, sound effects on the heartbeat. I'm going to add that to my presentation from now on. Okay. So, but you know, there's this great Irish singer. Maybe some of you have heard of Van Morrison. And he's got this great lyric. How do I get my heart to do the thinking and my head to do the feeling? And that's what I came to. I said, you know, I've been working in Silicon Valley. I created companies with great value. Why is it then when it came to fighting a situation of poverty, why did I say, okay, I'm not going to try and make a reputable, sustainable business model. I'm going to try and find a way to spend money and not get anything out of it. So here's the challenge. I come to Kathy. I say, Kathy, I have this village in northern Thailand. She's so compassionate. I say, could you please just give me $5,000 to help me? She goes, okay. It's year end, tax deductible. I'll help you out. So she writes a check. I go away. 12 months later, I come back to Kathy. Kathy, could you write me I gave you $5,000 last year. I know, I spent it. That's what I do. I'm a nonprofit. Right? And so Kathy is such a nice person. Okay, I'll give her one more. She writes it. I go away. I come back a year later. Kathy, I need $5,000. You know, they discovered dolphins in Lake Michigan. I love what you do, but I'm on to my next thing now. Right? And that's not because Kathy's a compassionate person. Who doesn't care for dolphins in Lake Michigan? My gosh, they're freezing, right? So, it's compassion. But it's so hard to build a model where you can actually get any traction. If you look at the numbers of nonprofits, charities, philanthropies started over the last 70 years, the number of them that have scaled beyond startup to 50 million, I could count on my two hands. You count the same number of companies that have started and gone from 0 to over 50 million, we don't have enough fingers and toes in this room to count those, right? Something's wrong with the model. So I decided, okay, look, if I'm going to attack slavery, that's going to be what I want to solve. Forced labor, exploitation of 30 million people in rug looms, rice mills, brothels, construction crews, agricultural fields, all over the world. I need to attack slavery at its roots. And it's not going to work if I've added up all the nonprofits who are fighting trafficking in the world to $100 million. Who's going to win that game? $100 million of total organizations, International Justice Mission, Free the Slaves, Anti-Slavery International. I could add all the groups, 100 million, not for sale, $32 billion. I got to create a new business model. Now, there are people in the room tonight who know how to build businesses. And typically, we're not challenged to use our acumen, our skill set, to solve some of the intractable, seemingly intractable problems in the world today. And so I wanted to make that my challenge. That was going to be my calling, as it were. So I want to take you through a little journey that I went on. While Thailand was happening, and part of my global investigation, I went from Houston, where I discovered that there were a number of Latin Americans, including Peruvians, ending up in Houston, in the massage parlors and brothels of Houston. So I went down to Peru, and there I met a woman who was very similar, incredibly similar to Quinlan in many respects, and she had done some heroic work. I wanted to get behind her, and we built the shelter. So we had a lot of kids, and we started gathering data. So data is really important. We started gathering the data. Where are they coming from? How did they get here? Who was the trafficker? That really helps us go upstream. So it's really kind of important at a university. You teach good data and analysis and what it means to create a strategy based on your data. So we started to do this, and literally we had to go upstream because we found that so many of these kids, again, teenagers, many of them, came from the Amazon. And in the Amazon of Brazil and in Peru and the whole region of Amazonia, you still have ethnic tribes people who are being taken advantage of because of their lack of access to any education or economic activity. And illegal mines are coming in, illegal logging, just a whole set of illicit activities who find the indigenous people, the tribal people, ripe for exploitation, including the commercial sex trade, including forcing them to work in charcoal mines, in lumber mills, in mines, right? So we went upstream and said, okay, if we're going to solve this problem, we need to go upstream to the Amazon. Next step, okay, who do I know? Who do I know who can help me with this? Now, I don't know if any of you take part in these international events like the Clinton Global Initiative or World Economic Forum in a place called Davos. You've heard of it, though, right? Okay, well, what's Davos? Right? It's a little town in Switzerland. I never heard of it before that. And I used to go to these events, and, you know, I'd hear the president of say, Germany talk about what they were going to do to eradicate X and change Y. And then the CEO of Apple would get up and go, and I go, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Then I go away for a year, and I come back the next year. And the same speeches happen. I go, what happened this last year? Nothing changed. It was like plumage on stage, right? And we were all like really impressed. Oh my gosh. And I said, okay, I'm so fed up with it. As you can tell, I'm kind of a doer. Another curse, my mother said. Okay. So what's Davos? I live in a little town in California called Montero. All right? So I'm going to have a Montero circle. And I'm going to invite the 50 most influential people I know. Now, I don't have the same network as Bill Clinton. And I didn't know any of you. I'm sure I'd invite probably half of you. But I had to go with the people I knew at the time. And I knew 50 people. Okay. Founder of Twitter. That was pretty good. I invited, let me see, the guy who ran all the apps on the iPhone. The guy who owns Weetabix in Orange Gina. That was a pretty good one. A baseball player for the San Francisco Giants. Looks better now than it did then. So, 50 people, right? Bring them into a room and said, all right, we are now experts at forced labor. We're going to lock the doors and force you over the next 2 days to help us think of a business model that will work in the Amazon of Peru. Right? You know people, you know how to do things, you have resources, you can help us figure this out. So over 2 days, we're going to have a design workshop, the Montero Circle, and we're going to figure out in 2011 of March how to create a solution for this group of people in the Amazon. Right? 77 tribes, which really represented thousands of people, help us come up with that idea. And here's the thing. I don't know what happened. It was almost like, I think I grew up in this fit of Pentecostal evangelicalism where I got caught up in my own hype. Because I said, on Monday morning, we're going to put into practice whatever you come up with. My staff looked at me like, Holy Mother of God. All right, so on Monday morning, whatever idea you come up with in the next 2 days, we're going to put into practice. So to prepare our group, this is the video that we showed them.
The Peruvian Amazon is one of the most ecologically wealthy places on the entire planet, and yet the people are some of the poorest in the world. There's something wrong with that picture.
The communities in the Peruvian Amazon are 7 hours from the nearest city upriver. The only way to get there is by boat, and the community members can't even afford to own a boat.
They don't have access to marketplace. They don't have healthy jobs in their own community. So traffickers come in.
He sido explotado. He trabajado día y noche las 24 horas.
It's happening, and primarily because there's a lack of economic opportunities for work.
When we looked at the Amazon region, we saw rich resources. We saw people who desperately wanted to work and build a new future. We knew there had to be a solution to the problem. The only question is, what would that solution be?
Part of the solution we came up with was relatively simple. It was to provide villagers a boat. But what happens when the boat wears out? How do we create not a charity-based model, but a sustainable model?
It's creating jobs. Unfortunately, to create jobs is a pretty complex process. You need to engage the communities themselves. You need to engage local businesses that are creating products. You need to engage international retailers like supermarkets, and you also need to engage consumers to understand why it's important and why they should be buying these types of products. What we came up with was an incredible idea that would link all of those actors together, and what we came up with was Rebel.
I got to tell you, when those 50 people showed up, it was almost like, they were a deer in the road and these big headlights were coming at them. Okay, in the Amazon today, we got these great problems, and you're going to help us figure out a solution. There's like, and tomorrow, many of you are going to participate in a Montero Circle, which is really cool. And we're going to look at Chicago, and we're going to do some pretty creative things that, actually, I don't know what happened to the business school here. They're going to run with it too, just like I did. Maybe they have the same Pentecostal and fervor that's coming on to them. But really, it's about believing in our capacity to create solutions that engage the best of our economic activities, the best of our skill sets, our resources, and saying, you know what? We can solve this when we don't somehow think someone else should do it. Right? So someone else should do it. I think you're the one. Right? You're the one that can help us with that. And it's the aggregation of ideas and energy that come together. And I was so thrilled what this group came up with.
So we were joking around, and we said, what if we locked all of the smartest business leaders that we know in one room and had them solve all of our problems for us? And that's pretty much what we did. We gathered top leaders from business and culture, and we broke them into small groups, and we asked them to compete to come up with the best business model to create jobs in the Amazon.
One of the most extraordinary groups in terms of the range of characters in it included a lawyer, it included the founder of an online healthcare company, it included an agronomist, and a baseball player.
These are large people in large corporations, and they're brilliant minds, and they've got brilliant ideas. I didn't go to college. I signed out of high school. I don't have a business degree in anything. I was out of place, I really was. I didn't feel like I had anything to offer.
The guy from the online health company started to look on Google and found out that there was this unusual plant called cat's claw that came out of the Amazon.
And I was sitting there and I was drinking tea. I remember I was getting into this tea concept, and I just said, hey, can you do an herbal tea? Like, can you make this a tea? And we all just looked at each other, and we were like, man, that's actually an interesting thought.
It's a tea company that sources ingredients in the Amazon and creates jobs. That's the idea that eventually became Rebel.
Within an hour, we created this whole business idea around this tea, and then we had to present it, and they made me present it, and I don't know anything about presenting that kind of stuff.
And Rebel won because it was so practical in creating jobs for the people in that region. It linked a consumer up with a producer, someone who wanted to be involved in changing the world with the people who most needed that change.
The next thing I know, I'm getting stuff in the mail, and Dave asking me if I want to invest in the tea. And I actually was like, what tea? At first. And he's like, the tea idea you came up with. And I'm like, you're actually running with that? So now I got bragging rights. It was my idea,
World Series Game 7 winner, Jeremy Affeldt. Crazy. It was crazy. All right, so Monday morning comes. You're going to start a beverage. I don't know if any of you ever started a beverage before. I would suggest you don't think about that again in your life. I didn't realize how hard it is to start a beverage. Low margins, competitive landscape. You walk into a Kroger, IGA, Safeway, Whole Foods, and you've got, that whole wall with beverages, and yours is going to stand out somehow. Holy smokes. And the margins on it. I didn't realize you don't make any money on beverage for about 5 years. It's kind of hard to pitch an idea. Hey, I got this great idea. You can invest in this company. It's going to not make a cent for 5 years. So we took a pretty high Mount Kilimanjaro model, right? So what was nice is that Jeremy, after he was getting over the shock that we were going to run with this idea, he said, I'll invest. And we had other investors who got on board. Part of this is to create a company that's just like any other company that's going to compete on that wall of beverages. All right? It's going to be a for-profit company. The difference here is that we're going to source our ingredients from the Amazon of Peru, from the communities where we work. The maca root, mate, guaisana leaf, hibiscus, mint or menta, cat's claw, which is una de gato, all out of the Amazon. You source from that region. You create this beverage, and this beverage goes into stores around the United States. You make a profit. You return gross revenue back to the communities to build skills. It all sounds great on paper until you get to Monday morning. All right, so you're going to start a beverage company. Do you go to, this wonderful person who got their theology degree at McCormick Theological Seminary? They've always wanted to work in beverage. That'd be great. They could sell it at the public farmer's market in Chicago on the week. No. All right? What do? You do the other company. You go find the best beverage maker in the world. Because you need to bring talent to this. Right? See, if I'm going to solve a social problem, I want to bring the best people in the world. I go to Stanford, Harvard, or Loyola, all the top schools, all right? That's going to cost you. Okay. And I'll talk to the students, and I'll say, okay, I'm doing these companies, because we now have 10 companies. Okay, so I'm doing these companies and not for sale. I go, oh my gosh, I just love what you're doing. If I can't get a job at Goldman Sachs or Apple, maybe I think about come working for you. I'm like, I don't want you, loser. I want the best and the brightest. What do I want the people who, I'm your third or fourth, I couldn't get a job anywhere. Can I work with you because you're doing good in the world? Instead of thinking, you know what, I'm the brightest in my class, and I want to do good in the world. Until we get to that place, we're not going to change anything. We're really not. Because we're going to get the people who couldn't cut it anywhere else, and so let me do some good. So I went after the best beverage maker in the world, the guy who won the Academy Award for the best drink the year before, and I know you want to go to that session next year, I get you tickets, the beverage industry. And now, for the top creative genius in beverage making, Paulo Hawken. And I got him. You know how I got him? I got him like you do any other thing. You offer a compensation that is equal to any other beverage company. You give them stock options that are as good or better than any other company. And you recruit the best talent. And then you go out and you raise the capital that allows you to grow that company. From 18 months from this wild idea that we had in the Montero Circle till July of 2012, we created an incredible beverage called Rebel. Roots, extract, berry, bark, leaves. Rebel. Be different. Don't drink the same old crud everybody else drinks. What's that Pepsi and Coke you're putting in your body? Drink a Rebel. Natural super herbs from the Amazon. They give you energy. They make you younger. They do all kinds of things for your sex life. Be a rebel for a cause, right? Okay, on and on it goes. See, I got better after not for sale. I said, forget that not for sale stuff. Buy my drink. Okay. So, Rebel then becomes, we're in Whole Foods around the country. We are now in natural organic grocers. We're going after our Series B right now. Growing, scaling. And it's a company that I don't have to give you an excuse. I sell it because it's the best drink, I think, on that whole shelf. Oh, and by the way, you're creating jobs for people who are otherwise not going to get jobs. Oh, and by the way, you're also helping not for sale fight human trafficking in the world. That's the future, I believe, of business that creates social futures. So we then in early 2013 covered the West Coast, and we hope we can come to Chicago very soon because we skipped over the Midwest. I really am sorry. We're going to come here, though. Maybe tomorrow. That's part of our conversation. Why we skip the Midwest. Okay, so we thought, well, you know, this is actually an extraordinary model. It's almost about reinventing the way we think about social change in business. It's about reinventing philanthropy, reinventing real change, so that I don't have to come here in about 10 years and talk to you and your children who are now adults and have graduated from Loyola University of Chicago and say, you know what, the world is still in a bad place. We haven't changed anything. I don't want to do that. You know what, I'll go back and be an investment banker and just make money for my... Why do I want to do that? If I don't really believe we can make change, and so that's why I'm asking you to believe with me, we can change things. So what are the things that actually bring about change in your world? They require the best talent, the best capital, the best models, the real effort of people who believe the world can be different. If it's something we do every year, at the end of the year we write a nice check, or we on Sunday morning or Saturday, whatever your religious holiday is, if that's the only time we think about change, it will never happen. And I want to believe that we can make a difference. So, we had Montero Circles in other places of the world, and one I really loved was in Amsterdam. And I want to talk one more iteration of this that gets you to think about creativity in business. Because this one was also really extraordinary. It takes place in Europe, in the country of the Netherlands. Has anyone been to Amsterdam? Okay, a lot of people in the room have been to Amsterdam. And so, you know, you may, when you visit Amsterdam, run into the red light district, which, you know, it's almost a bit of like a jarring place because you see these windows, about half the size of these great windows here, but behind each window is a young girl who can be bought for 15 minutes, an hour, a night, a week. You can just buy the girl. And it's shopping. You just go, okay, I'll have that girl there. And, you know, in the Netherlands, when we first started Not for Sale to think about working there, we were told, you know, listen, don't even think you can make any difference there. This has been going on for, you know, well over 1,000 years. It's just part of the culture. In fact, the Dutch have even legalized the sex trade. It's something that's just a part of the culture. You're never going to change it. So, okay, how do you approach social problems? Let's kind of use what we've learned now. First, you go to the end of the river, you reach out to those most in need, and you start gathering data. Right? Because that's the place where you get your strategy. Right? Whether you're building a customer base, you want to go to the end of the river, the people who buy your product. When you're talking about a social problem, you go to the end of the river. Right? The point of contact. And we learned, as we started to give medical services to these young girls. And we started to give legal services to them. And we started gathering data. We saw this pattern emerge. 3 out of 4 of these young girls come from Eastern Europe. 3 countries, actually. Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria. There's even an alleyway in the Amsterdam region, red light district, that's named after a village in Hungary where all the girls from that village come there. Now, in Holland, there's this idea, it's kind of this belief that, you know what, but that's, you know, people have choice. If they want to do that, we want to give them their choice. But I'll tell you, you don't find any young Dutch girls growing up saying, you know, gosh, should I go to university? Should I work as a barista at the local coffee shop, or should I go work behind the window in a brothel? You don't see those choices being made. It's these young girls that are taken advantage of. And what you find as you start to learn about their behavior and what's happening to them, you learn that there is a trafficker who stands about 20 yards away, watching each of the windows to make sure they fill their quota, that they don't try and leave, that they are managed and controlled and coursed. So, again, what do you do about that? In my early days, before I started listening to Van Morrison, I'd say, oh, let's create a soup kitchen because they have such poor nutrition. Let's reach out to these young girls and help them make soup. I could be making soup for the rest of my life, and I'm not going to change it. But soup is a pretty good idea. So let's find the best chefs who make the best soup in the Netherlands, and let's create a soup company. And you know who our customers are going to be? The women behind the windows. Now, it's very counterintuitive. They've been trafficked, exploited, so let's sell them soup. But what we wanted to do was to engage them from day one in an activity where they realized that they had a relationship with a real company. That even a company that maybe one day they have this deepening relationship. And so we started taking the soups to them. We had caterers who would go and deliver the soup to the women behind the windows. And soon we started a mobile texting plan where they could text, what's the soup today? We say, it's ginger. They said, could you bring it between 2 and 2:30 when I'm not seeing John's clients? And then our caterers would go. And so we started with 5 or 10 girls, and then we had 20, we had 50, we had 100. We started to grow this business. And then the police in Amsterdam called us. They said, you know, you need to come in. So our team goes in to meet the chief of police. And we're thinking, you know, we never did actually ask for a business license. We just started doing this. Probably not the smartest thing. So we go in, and the chief of police says, so we hear you're selling soup in the red light district to the women behind the windows. Yeah, we are. We hear it's really good soup. Yeah, pretty good. We got some of the best chefs. Yeah. Could you, like, cater our precinct? We're like, oh, wow. All right, so if you're going to start a business, think about this. Sex workers and cops, not a bad start for your customer demographic. I thought it was a really kind of interesting kind of skill set. All right, okay, so we started scaling. Now here's the problem I have. We're selling so much soup, I need more chefs and more caterers. So we started a culinary school. This will sound weird if you haven't heard of this guy, the naked chef, Jamie Oliver. Okay, good. Okay, because some people, I say this some places, they go, the naked chef? But this German, does he not wear clothes? Okay. So the naked chef. You know, Jamie Oliver has a program for troubled youth in the Netherlands and other places where they already had the skill set. So they said, look, we'd love to help you create this culinary school. And so we went to the women who were still behind the windows, and we said, look, we're looking for people who will go through this training and we can give them their first job. And so we got a lot of young women who wanted to do this. That was a nice alternative from where they were. Some said, you know, I'd love to, but my trafficker, my pimp would beat me up. So now we have a criminal activity, really clear, really defined. And we would then feed that to the local police, right? Let them take care of that. We don't, not for sale. We don't want to be that visible. And so in that regard, we started getting this flow. Well, we had a Monterey Circle. We had one of these think tanks in Amsterdam. We had the CEO, HEMA, which is kind of the Trader Joe's of Europe, come. Senior executives from ING and Heineken and all these other Dutch companies, cheese and bread. And, okay. It was extraordinary. The CEO of Heyman, within 5 hours of us starting, he just came up to me and said, look, he had the same fit of Pentecostal fervor. Whatever you come up with, whatever is the product here, I will stock in all of my 300 stores across Europe. Huge commitment, huh? It was awesome. Be like someone, from Kroger or IGA or Safeway said, look, we're just going to put it in our shelves. And so we said, okay, let's run with that. And out of that came this idea, we're going to sell the soup all over Europe. So you go to Europe today, you can get our not-for-sale soup in every store in the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. And it was because someone stepped up with already having the network. See, again, if you have to do everything from the bottom up, really difficult to do, right? If you try to do everything from the decision maker down, kind of tough to do as well. But when you have the combination of the two, really it's quite extraordinary. Great results can come from that. And so for us, this was the beginning of a very exciting set of activities that have led us now to a place where today we have a hub, an invention hub, about half a mile from the ballpark, so we can still see the game. And we are incubating companies that bring about profitable business models and change the world. We need both. So when we look at a company, so sometimes, okay, you heard this language of social enterprise. I'm a little bit skittish about it because it means lots of things to different people. For some people, it means that, we create little crafty bags, the multicolored ones you can get in Bangladesh, Guatemala, or in, Berkeley. Right? And maybe some of you have even bought one. I call it guiltware, because you're on a holiday. It'll be so great. And then you buy one of those bags from the family. And then you get home and you look at it and go, what was I thinking? Right? And you put it in the closet and you never use it. I know you've been there, right? So guiltware is not a social enterprise. And sometimes I'll say, I work in social enterprise or social impact. And they go, oh, do you create, so you're doing latrines in Kenya? Oh, why am I doing latrines in Kenya? Right? So it's changing that mentality. Now on the other side, I was just in Europe. I was speaking at the Royal Palace, and the King of Sweden invites all of the executives to come, and I love this. Because the king asks you to come, are you going to turn him down? So I was fortunate enough to be the keynote this last year. And before the event started, we're just kind of milling around, like tonight. And this guy from UBS Bank, he's an executive with UBS. He came up to me and said, so hey, I'm Zach, what do you do? And I said, I'm Dave. And so I change up sometimes, because if I say social enterprise now, I'm a little nonprofit guy, right? So I said, well, I'm an investor. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, yeah, I invest in technology and natural organic foods, which I do. They go, oh, wow, what kind of company is that? And I said, well, every company is driven by profitability and also has to make a social impact for people or the planet. He goes, oh my gosh. Now this guy's from UBS. You should talk to our philanthropy group. I don't want to talk to your philanthropy group. I want to talk to the people who really give the money away and invest, right? But it's a mentality, and we've got to overcome that paradigm. Now, part of it is creating businesses that really do make a difference. Because you know what? I'm operating 21st century companies. If you're a 21st century company is looking at resource scarcity. It's looking at how we live in a planet where there's a lot of transparency and interconnection. And if you are not running business in a way that actually deals with that in a very engaging way, embedded in your business, then what the heck are you doing? In fact, I'm not going to invest in your company. You're at a big risk. Where are you going to get the resources that are going to enable you to go forward? How are you going to work in an environment where the only way to make your product is by polluting the environment? If the only way to actually hire people is to take advantage and exploit them, that's not going to be a company I want to invest in. So, yeah, I'm an investor. Are you? How are you dealing with those challenges? To me, that's the 21st century. Thank you very much. Great to be with you tonight, and I appreciate it.